Hello again. Welcome to our next session, A Giant Leap into the Cookieless Future. Speaking on the stage will be Dustin Rehmann, Senior Director of Marketing at Beyond Inc., Lisa Martinez, Director, Global Partnerships, Google Chrome Privacy Sandbox, Michael Lamb, CCO at RTB House, and Moderator, Farzana Nasser, Partner at Chameleon Collective. Please welcome them on stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming today. We're excited to have a really interesting conversation. As you know, the ad tech landscape is evolving. And a part of that is new standards for open web that are being forged. Cookie deprecation has already begun. And I know that's top of mind for a lot of the folks in this room. How do we mitigate the risks, overcome the challenges, drive performance? So we'll be discussing in detail today what a cookieless future means for brands. So we'll start with introductions. I'm Farzana Nasser. I'm a partner at Chameleon Collective, where I serve an interim head of growth roles for D2C brands. And I'll pass it on to you, Michael.
Excellent. Thanks, Farzana. I'm Michael Lamb. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at RTB House. We're an independent ad tech based in Europe, which means, by the way, we've been dealing with these privacy trends very substantially for 5 years or more. We offer automated performance marketing based on first-party data, deep learning, and shoppable creative. And we help clients like Skechers and beyond drive sales.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lisa Martinez Gilpin. I lead the partnerships team for the Privacy Sandbox, or the Privacy Partnerships team within Google. My focus is purely working with the Chrome and Android teams on developing privacy-preserving technologies to take us into the future. And I should say it's separate from the Google Ads team, which is a different entity, different business. Great.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm Dustin Rehmann, Senior Director of Demand Generation Marketing for Beyond Inc. Basically, I oversee all of our paid performance programs, anything that can be optimized. Beyond, if you don't know, is the parent company for Bed Bath & Beyond, which is back, and we recently brought back Overstock.com, and we'll be bringing back Zulily. That was a recent acquisition of ours. And we also have other related brands and services that are all built to kind of help the consumer find the products to unlock their home's potential.
Great. So Dustin, let's kick it off with you. I'm going to put you in the hot seat. So what is the role of advertising on the open internet for you as a performance marketer? Like, let's set the table stakes. Tell us about what the role is right now for you, and even in the future, what you expect it to be.
I mean, I find the open internet, that's a very important piece of our advertising. There's a lot of scale. There's certain people who just aren't not wanting to go to a mainstream site, so there's still a lot of potential inventory out there, and it's an opportunity for those that want to go and dive into that. So that's something that we've always been focused on. We want to be able to speak to all of our customers. And also, when you start looking at some of the bigger, more walled gardens and stuff, you tend to they'll profile certain customers and do things, but especially when you're trying to tap into niche audiences, I think on the open web, there's a great opportunity to go in and find some of those customers that you may not be able to find on other platforms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like a very critical part of the marketing mix.
It's important now, and it's going to continue to be important in the future.
What are your thoughts on that, Lisa?
I mean, I think as Google, we're certainly very keen and dialed into the idea that there's this huge thriving digital business that happens on the web and also in-app as well. And part of my role is really thinking about privacy principles as we start to introduce these new privacy-preserving technologies into the ecosystem and working with the industry. As it relates to performance marketing, we think that especially ad-supported businesses can thrive and coexist with more privacy-enabling technologies. So it's not a giving something up to get, it's actually an and statement. And so, as we move forward, these technologies will adjust and shift how we look at marketing and how we look at measuring. And so that's always, front of the page for us as well.
Okay. Michael, as a company that's very focused on advertising on the open web, would love your perspective as well on this.
At one level, Farzana, it's simple. The open web is important to us, kind of the way water is important to a goldfish. Super important. But I had one of our many really smart clients tell me the open internet was super important to them because in a concentrated market, it's the marginal supplier who sets the price. And so, for him, the open internet was in a way the marginal supplier of inorganic conversions. And his rationale was, unless he wanted all of his spend and more of his margin going to a short list of advertising giants, he really needed the open internet to succeed and scale. And so I think that's our mission.
Great. We're really lucky to have Lisa here. She is a Google OG and has been there for 20 years. So we're hearing it from the source as far as what's going to happen next. And I think the big question for everyone in the room is, what is happening with third-party cookies, and what are you guys working on as far as a solution?
You don't say.
What's the news?
Well, let's see. So third-party cookies are basically, when we look at them, they were a technology that now is roughly 30 years old. And so even if we look at this from a technological lens and we look at all the developments that have happened from open web all the way to app development, cloud, artificial intelligence, the move to mobile, et cetera, they roughly happen in 10-year increments. So if you think about this third-party cookie transcending across a 30-year time horizon, it's time to make a shift. And so with that, it's not necessarily about the what, but the how. And so it's like, okay, we've been using this technology. It's been okay. We've kind of worked with it. It's never been perfect, but it's what we have. And so now it's like, how do we transition and transform onto something else? And so it takes a lot of different sort of areas of the ecosystem. One, industry. So Google can't do this alone. We are one player in a massive space. It's an ecosystem. And so working with the industry and with the ecosystem on what this looks like through experimentation and trials and discovery and a lot of education, while we're also building, is one facet. Users. We know from Pew Research and lots of other research that users want more transparency into how their data is being collected and how it's being used. And they also want the option to say no, and making it easy for them to do that is something that has been a challenge in the past. Finally, regulation. Regulators are also going to start mandating more and more that we as Google, but also the industry, is much more transparency and offers more control to users, and that it's very clearly articulated, that it's not just the industry that understands this lingo, but that somebody who's outside of the industry can very quickly make a decision whether they want to opt in and opt out. And so that's basically what's happening throughout the sort of system. And then it's on the Google side, it's like, well, what are we going to build and how do we build for the future? And so that's something that we care very deeply about, which is we do feel that these two things can work hand in hand. And then it's about, what does good testing look like? And then making sure that we're not giving up effectiveness and utility, but that actually it makes sense for the industry as well.
That's helpful. And can you give us a sense of timing as well? When is this expected to happen?
Sure. So yeah, timing. You're never too early or too late, I guess. But yes, especially on Chrome, Android's been is in a different sort of maturation, but Chrome especially, I would say, in January of 2024, we announced the 1% of the Chrome browsers are starting to deprecate third-party cookies. So while 1% seems small, it's a big audience. So we've already kicked that off, and that's in flight. And so where do we go from there? Right now, we have ecosystem partners that are testing the APIs and the technologies. We have regulators. We work really closely with the CMA, who's also looking at analysis and understanding feedback from the ecosystem. And then we kind of butted right up into Q4. which of course for this audience is, a huge buying season with e-commerce, a lot of code freezes and the like. And so we thought maybe that wasn't the best time. And so we should give folks a little more time, and that means really in early 2025 is where we're looking at advancing and moving forward. And so the takeaway is, it's a little bit more time. It's roughly 6 months, but so it's not the time to take your foot off the gas pedal, but actually it's the time to really lean in and get involved because, as we all know, 6 months goes really quickly. And so a lot of my team's work is preparing and working with the ecosystem to make sure we get the word out and we're as helpful as we can in this process.
That's great. Yeah, avoiding Q4 was a good call. So thank you on behalf of all of us for that.
Yeah, we heard a lot of feedback about that and happy to have been able to act on and address that feedback and get a little more time.
Great. Quick poll of the audience. Raise your hands if you're using third-party cookies today in your advertising, marketing. Yeah, a lot of people are impacted. Michael, can you tell us a little bit about how you're preparing your clients for this change?
Yeah, sure. And maybe the first thing to say, and Lisa was too nice to say it, is, this wasn't Google's idea. They didn't have this. They weren't the first people to decide this. This has actually been going on for quite a long time, right? So Safari and Firefox, we're all, well familiar now with, a world of sort of decreasing addressability. And by the way, thank God Google didn't just go ahead and do it when they first said they would in 2021. What Google have done that's different is given us all a chance to develop some alternative technology that will provide, for us at least, more or less a full replacement to the kind of first-party advertising that we do.
Yeah.
And we've been working very closely with Google to shape that. Like I said, thank God they didn't launch it in 2020. We've spent a lot of time shaping that thing up. And I think it was a good decision to wait a little while longer so that everyone in the ecosystem can be ready. From our point of view, it's our job to make this sort of seamless from the perspective of our clients. We're very focused on maintaining scale and precision on the other side of the change. We're really confident that the Privacy Sandbox as written will allow us to do that. We can view behavior on websites, we can use that at bid time, we can bid with precision, we can render dynamic ads, we can do all the things we're used to doing. And by the way, we've learned a couple new tricks along the way. I know it's the sort of AI track here. We've taken this opportunity, and maybe the opportunity of this extra 6 months has allowed us to go live with some new uses of generative AI in our core product to do contextual targeting, which obviously is as old as the internet, but had never really worked for pure performance players. And so we've been able to use the sort of next generation of large language models to make that work for us in a performance setting. So, for our clients, we expect this to be seamless. We're going to deliver performance, and we're going to leverage the Privacy Sandbox, first-party data, and those AI advances to do it.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I think there's a lot of tools that are in place now to be able to execute around this. Dustin,
stuff we didn't have in 2020.
Exactly. If the time is right, it feels like now is the right time. So, Dustin, from an advertiser perspective, can you share a little bit about how you're preparing for this?
Yeah, I feel like this is just like the next chapter in a book. Like Lisa was saying, this really all started 7 or 8 years ago. We had Cambridge Analytica, Meta started removing stuff, then Safari. So it's not the first time we've kind of been down this road before. The change is kind of, nope. Does anyone here really like change? Probably not. It's much easier to just keep going with what we're going. But it's something, like you said earlier, consumers are demanding it. So what we're doing is we're really, what we've been doing really since the beginning, but we're doing it even more now, is just talking with all our partners, reaching out, finding how this is happening. And it's been evolving. Like, I've heard Google talk a number of times and just seeing how your process evolved and how this has changed even to kind of meet more of our needs in this latest iteration has been really helpful. So it's doing that. I think it's also we're going through our tech stack, seeing like we can be better about plugging up gaps, like with first-party data, making sure we're collecting things in the right places so we have better information when we can share it, to build out these new audiences and go after things. And Yeah, it's just kind of being prepared, talking, and then we've been doing lots of testing and learning at this stage, because right now it's the time we can do it. We have what we're doing right now that we can benchmark against, see how these new audiences are doing. And the other thing would be like more, cookies have been a great way to stitch together cross-device, cross-channel. That's kind of been one of my biggest fears with this kind of going away. So looking at different measurement models, attribution, taking all those things together and, again, testing them now, seeing how those results are panning out, and in that way, when they do go shut off, it's not something that's going to be a surprise.
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction. I think a lot of folks are aware of the impact that this will have on advertising, but attribution as well will be impacted by this, so preparing for that. I know you've mentioned testing and learning and doing things to mitigate some of the things that you won't get anymore once everything is kind of fully deprecated. Can you talk a little bit more about any examples of what you've been doing from that perspective?
Yeah, I mean, we've been testing a lot of interest and behavioral type audiences, but then also we're trying to move more up the funnel and look at other metrics that we want to use for measurements to gauge how some of these different platforms are working and how that's going to pan out over the entire customer life cycle and bring those into our metrics as well. And then, like I said too, the measurement side of it, we have an MTA, we've been working with MMMs as well, incrementality tests, and just seeing again, where we are right now, how these new audiences are looking, and that way, once the cookies are fully deprecated, we have an idea of how this is going to look. I mean, this is what we did when Facebook did this back in 2017, 2018.
Yeah.
It was the same thing. We still had their metrics. Things changed in our reporting, but everything else stayed the same. Our top line was the same, and the platform metrics are similar. So it's a gauge of where we're going.
Yeah, Michael, you've already gone live with first-party advertising. Can you talk a little bit more about your experience so far with that and the performance around it?
Yes, we've been live since January 4th, Lisa? I don't know, 4th? Okay.
Early January, yeah.
On this fraction of traffic, it's something like 30 million browsers globally. So, real scale. And it was a slow ramp there for a little while, because a lot of folks, I think, still are sort of waiting for the real gong to ring to show up. We couldn't afford to do that. We had to be there and be involved because this is existential to us. And so, like I said, we've been able to demonstrate that this thing works, that we are able to technically deliver the kind of personalized advertising, the kind of engagement and performance that our clients demand, and do it in a way that doesn't involve sort of spraying everybody's data all over the place. So that's been great. We've had good proof of concept there. We see engagement and conversion rates that start to approach the classic system, so we have a lot of confidence in that. There's some things that we're really still working on. We have a roadmap with Google, obviously, and then we're really waiting to see more supply show up on these new rails, and then make sure that the actual auction, which some parts of which have shifted from being purely in the cloud to being on the device, we're waiting to make sure that's going to perform properly. So, we were happy to see that we maybe get another 6 months to work some of those practicalities out. But the fundamental system works, and we have a lot of confidence in it.
That's great to hear. Lisa, tell us a little more about Google Privacy Sandbox and how you're approaching measurement.
Yeah, sure. So at Privacy Sandbox, of course, like I mentioned before, we're always taking the ecosystem into account because obviously our ethos is open. Even if you consider Android, it's an open ecosystem where we like to make sure we have information that is widely available and searchable. You can find any of this information online and stay up to date either through privacysandbox.com or just doing a simple Google search. So beyond just the ecosystem play, we're also thinking through what does reporting look like? So it's not to say that everything's going to be a one-for-one shift. So I would definitely encourage marketers to get involved and start to, if you haven't leaned in with your ad tech partners, lean in and ask questions. Can we be part of the test? Because you'll notice that there are some differences in reporting, but also you'll see the signals are changing because we're using new tech privacy-safe technologies like encryption and aggregation and other things. So, so I would say those are the tenets of like what are the new technologies we can take advantage of that are privacy-safe? What are the things where we feel like with users it can still sort of be a little creepy about like sort of tracking all of your browser history, for instance. That goes away. But you still have the utility that marketers need in terms of being able to serve relevant ads and being able to get measurement and test results on the back end post-click to understand what's going on. Yeah. So that's really what we're optimizing for.
That's great. Yeah, I think that the top of mind challenges for most folks are can we still target the people that we need to target?
Yes.
And can we measure
yes.
whether or not it's successful? Like that's it. If we can do those two things, I think a lot of people would be very, very happy.
I just add one more thing too, is we also want to be able to still speak to our audiences the same way that we were. And that's what I think we've been building for now, is being able to personalize for those different groups.
Exactly, yeah. That's a great ad. It has to be relevant. Someone else earlier talked about the cookie, like an environment where they don't know who you are. It's not a great user experience, right? The ads you're going to get served are not going to be as relevant to you. So that's very important, I think, from a consumer perspective as well. So quickly to summarize, because I know we're almost out of time, this conference is all about actionable next steps. So let's talk Commerce Next steps. For the folks in the room, what can they do tomorrow when they go back to their desks to start preparing for this? We'll start with you, Dustin.
I'd say definitely, if you haven't already, start reaching out to your partners and collaborating with them and talking about and find out what they're doing and what you can do now. To do for part two would be to start testing and learning into this. Now's the time to start doing things, so you're not caught off guard when the change inevitably happens, probably in 2025, hopefully. I know there's been delays. And then yeah, the last thing, test and learn, collaborate, test and learn, and then start looking at attribution. That'd be the last thing I'd say, is really get into that. Look at your measurement, start setting baselines for that now, and that way, again, you'll be ready for the future when it comes.
Great. Over to you, Lisa.
Yeah, I would say, first and foremost, a lot of the heavy lifting's already been done by the ad techs like RTB House and others. So the infrastructure, the pipes are sort of in place. To that end, I would say if you do a simple Google search for Privacy Sandbox Analysis Tool, or PSAT, you will find there's a Chrome extension, and that will actually, once it's installed, it will show you all of the third-party cookies that exist on your .coms and on your websites, because third-party cookies are not just for advertising purposes. They're actually also used for login, for payments, and other things, social connectivity as well, and engagement. And oftentimes people just kind of forget about that piece. So I would say one actionable thing is go find that PSAT tool and start playing around with it on your website so you can understand where the breakages are, and talk to your data providers and your service providers about getting ready for third-party cookie deprecation. And then to Dustin's point, be open to testing new technologies. Raise your hand with your ad techs and say, I'd like to be part of the test, because learning and testing kind of go hand in hand. And then we start to see, we start to see patterns emerge, and you start to see feedback getting synthesized. And then, be vocal about what you need and what you see. It's sort of if you see something, say something mantra, because, obviously there's just a lot of moving parts to this. And so sometimes there are unique use cases that maybe we've taken into account, but we didn't really synthesize or grok how important it was to marketers. And so that context is always helps us as technologists in terms of how we shape technology moving forward. And of course, it's iterative. Just like Rome wasn't built in a day, cookies were also not perfected in a day. It took 30 years to get from the beginning to where they are now. And so this process is a multi-year process. We expect it to be that, and we also expect to be optimizing after third-party cookie deprecation as well. So it's not like we pack up our tents and go off and go do other things, not at all. Actually, there'll be more optimization and things that will happen, just like, at the ads business evolved over this time horizon as well.
Over to you, Michael. Bring us home.
Oof. I'm not sure I can add to the practical advice. That's very good advice. I might just repeat something I heard a CMO say on one of these stages, which is this is also a chance to sort of rethink and maybe reboot a little bit how everybody in the room is talking to your customer. The underlying motivation here from a privacy perspective is to do right by the consumer and meet their expectations. And I think for everybody here who represents a brand, not just a performance spreadsheet, this is a chance to step up, and own that and put a positive spin on this evolution for how you're talking to your customer.
You heard it here. Get prepared, test and learn, check out Google Privacy Sandbox, see what cookies you're currently using, and then we can all prepare accordingly. So thank you all for joining us today. Thank you to the panelists as well. Enjoyed the conversation. So have a good rest of the day, everyone.